We're going to start with something that we've talked about in the past, and that's with the Northwest Side Housing Center. Now, as we all know, Northwest Side Housing Center is fighting to help its people and its communities basically get affordable housing and affordable rent control so that, people aren't displaced. The same thing that's happening to the people in Pilsen, Brighton, Inglewood, South Austin. There's a whole crisis of gentrification and these large real estate developers moving into these low-income communities and displacing people, and thus, they're going to have to leave, and it's downright sad to hear these stories about people being displaced or no longer be able to afford to pay for their homes or even have affordable rent. So here's what happened on the live stream, and you could see it on our Facebook page. It was in regards to what can be done to help the working class communities, especially on the Northwest Side. So the one thing that was really interesting is that there were two aldermen there as well. And when it came down to talk about the TIFs and how come people can't use one of the TIF funds for the community, the aldermen were for it technically, but then we're saying that the process would be a little bit more complicated. And it kind of just reminds me to something that we've covered in the past, too, and that's Chicago's Not Broke, and how Tom Tresher has stated that TIF funds, while they are necessary, that they need to go because they don't really do what they're supposed to do. And currently, right now, as it stands with the TIF funds, is that it's the mayor's personal slush fund to basically do whatever he wants to do. So, Daniel, you were there with me, too. What do you want to add to this?
Well, I thought it was interesting the argument that the alderman had for not putting one in, which was if we put one into an area, then we also have to tax the area to get the money. So if you have an issue with people are paying, in their case, too much for housing, to put a TIF in the area would increase the property taxes so that you could then give the money back. But that seemed like that would have become circular. So it was an interesting comeback. I mean, the issue we have with TIFs is, again, on paper they're supposed to help rebuild communities, but in practice they're always abused, especially within the city. So they were trying to find ways to ensure that there is public housing available, which hasn't been the case. And from when we had the representative from the city that talked about their plan, he seemed to concede that when we put in the previous 5-year plan, we were worried about foreclosure because that was around the foreclosure crisis. And,
in 2008.
Yeah. And for this new one that they're putting in, they say that they're going to be focusing more on preserving and stopping gentrification. Now the city has made a lot of promises over the years, and a lot of them are laughably not kept.
Yeah.
So we'll see if that is the case. But if the city is at a point where they're like, we've built out what we need to build out, we can help other people in the city, at some point they need to, so why not now?
Yeah, and it kind of goes back to what Daniel has said in the past, that the city of Chicago and the way it runs its budget, like, for example, we have money and resources for a $95 million police academy, yet we don't have resources to keep our public schools open, rebuild our infrastructure, and help out homeowners and renters here in this city. It's like a father who has, it's like a drunk father who has money for alcohol but no money for paying the groceries.
Yeah. And it's interesting because, again, you can go even further that they've paid out $500 million in just police misconduct. But, again, that's not taken from anything the police do. It just comes from public funds.
Yeah.
So, how expensive are their police really if you factor in how much these settlements cost? If you factor in, a huge amount of the city's budget is on policing, but the police aren't, they only get, 25% of homicides solved? So, again, money is being thrown in the wrong areas, making solutions that aren't actually solutions that tend to make the problems worse. Mm-hmm. And the citizens are stuck paying ever more increased taxes while people in neighborhoods that are targeted have a worse standard of life, which makes it harder for them to grow in their income and their wealth, which makes it harder for them to live.
Yeah,
and I will say, good on the Northside Housing Center for trying to find solutions outside of TIFs, because on its face, people may say, "Oh, well, TIFs seem like a reasonable solution for getting the ends that we need," and it seems that the aldermen are pretty wise enough to say, "Yeah, it's a mixed bag. Maybe we don't want that. Maybe we want to find another way." So good on them for that.
When we look at how the Northwest Side Housing Center has been at least standing up, we saw them win, especially in regards to getting a new council for the Northwest Side Housing Authority. We saw them really remain active in regards to keeping the community informed about how people can still remain in their homes and have affordable rent. And so it's quite clear that they're looking at many alternate paths, and one, making sure they get the resources to help out their communities so that people aren't displaced. Because the one thing that was mentioned during the live stream, and we've heard it even when we covered stories in Pilsen, Inglewood, Brighton, is that please don't let this area become Logan Square, because Logan Square was gentrified, and the result of that was people were being displaced and going to the different other communities. Daniel?
And I also want to throw in that they had that map that they put up which showed the percentage of people that are paying more than 35% towards their rent.
Yeah.
And this is an important metric. It's used if you have housing, you should pay a third of it or less of your income should be housing costs. That's how people generally break down that. And you have a lot of people that live in these areas, and this is the effect of gentrification and those types of housing prices. It used to be maybe 30% of their income, but now it's maybe 50 or 60% of their income. Then you have utilities and everything else.
Yeah.
Which just, again, and that in a more macro sense, that hurts the greater economy if you want to go into that angle. Because now you have people that can only afford the very bare minimum.
Less discretionary spending.
Less discretionary spending, and the economy's built on it. And you see this happening throughout the entire country, where certain people have far more discretionary income, but fewer of them. But the masses of Americans don't. And if we have a economy that's built on consumerism, so it's very hard to consistently move in a direction that makes so many Americans unable to consume.